Hello, screenwriters, and welcome to Writing for Screens, today's live stream episode, Ask Me Almost Anything. My name is Glenn Gers, and I am the Chief Operating Everything here at Writing for Screens, a channel in which I have tried to take the skills, the tools, the insights that I had to figure out for myself in a 25-year career writing for TV and movies, put those things into short video lessons that I can pass on to you guys on my way out of the business, starting new creative endeavors. I am tried to create something with 10-minute lessons, very small, simple lessons. Here's a little screen grab of my main page of my channel right now, and if you look down towards the bottom, you will see that there are brightly colored thumbnails for 3 playlists. Let me show you these 3 playlists because they are everything. Screenwriting Essentials, Screenwriting Tools, Skills, and Craft, and The Process, Being a Writer. These 3 playlists comprise about 50 10-minute-ish videos, each one on a topic. The topic is in the title and in the thumbnail. Great big, bright, colorful letters like instinct, flashbacks, genre, dramatic action, thinking in scenes, all of these things. And I urge you to check them out because they are full of small, thought-provoking things for you to try, because there is no system, there are no rules, there is no right or wrong way to be a writer or to write something. Every artist must make their own path. Every artist must figure out what they want to do, what they can do, what they are prepared to do, and you've got to figure that all out by yourself because everyone is different and things are constantly changing. Thus, all I can do is say, try this thing, think about this thing. That's what these lessons are. A bunch of thoughts that you can try for yourself. Use the ones that help you. Toss the ones that don't. You'll get a better sense of who you are and what you do. Maybe you'll have some new tools to work with, and that is what we all need. And that's all we can do. So, having made those videos, I then began doing live streams. Currently, I do them every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific time zone. And I come on and do a different topic every week, and this week, I'm just going to answer questions. I have not prepared anything. I have nothing particular to tell you. I'm just here. So let's say hello to some people. Hello, Feng and Moria. And Feng is asking me a question, but I'm first going to say hello, Steed. Hello, Michael. And I hate Jackie Chan, who also has a question. Let me do Feng's question first. What do you think of The Life of Chuck? I just watched it before this class. I wept at the end. Wow. I am very eager to see it, but I have not yet seen it. So I cannot wait. It looks really cool. I am a big fan of the people involved, so I am glad that it moved you. I cannot wait to see it. Any thoughts about Jaws is back in the cinema? I'm not sure. I mean, lots of thoughts. My first thought is, how has it been 50 years since I was a junior in high school and that movie came out and there were lines around the block and I read the book before I saw the movie, and because everyone was reading it then. And it very much changed American cinema in many ways because it was while Star Wars and The Godfather and The Exorcist had all come along and eaten up hundreds of theaters and been really big, it was one of the first huge releases. One of the first, we're going to make opening weekend into this thing. We're going to put it on all these screens. We're going to saturate the media. We're going to make it an event, a blockbuster, a tent pole. That all started then. I mean, sure. Earlier, Gone with the Wind, Lawrence of Arabia, there were certainly movies that they opened even, back in the silent days. There were big movies, always have been. But the blockbuster business began with Jaws. So the answer is, I have recently rewatched Jaws, and it is both a masterpiece and kind of dated. It's interesting. It is both brilliantly done, beautifully done. The building of the characters, the laying out of suspense. However, all of the lessons that are in it have been so completely absorbed by succeeding generations that, frankly, a young person seeing Jaws now is like, yeah, sure. Why not? Of course. Whereas the fluidity of the camera work, the careful, playful, brilliant editing, the storytelling, all of that was wonderful at the time. It still holds up as an old movie. And honestly, as we all know, the rubber shark never really kind of worked. And I even remember being in the theater in 1975 and going, all right, this was really good, but that's a rubber shark. So I do have to say that the rubberness of the shark, it's sort of like the stiffness of King Kong back in the original King Kong, or the phoniness of the sets of early movies. They are part of their time. I will tell you one thing I'm fascinated by is I have heard that Steven Soderbergh is working on a book about the making of Jaws, in which he is going back to the archives and going through what they call the production reports, which are the daily paperwork involved in how much film was shot, how many takes were done, when they broke for lunch, all that stuff. You keep records of that because it's a business proposition. And so Soderbergh is going back and actually looking at all that and saying, okay, how long did it take to get this scene? How many takes was in that scene? Who was doing what when? It's an amazing piece of work. I cannot wait for it. Steven Soderbergh is an amazing artist, and his other books are fabulous. The book he wrote of interviews with Richard Lester is a masterpiece. I think it's called Getting Away with It by Steven Soderbergh. It's a fascinating piece of insight into both Soderbergh and Lester. It's also just really funny. Anyway, so that is the first thing I would say about Jaws being back in the cinema. Second of all, I think it's cool to re-release movies on the big screen. That was a thing that used to get done a lot. They used to rerun like a movie that it was a big blockbuster. They'd just say, hey, let's put Lawrence of Arabia back up in the big screen. And people would go, and it was cool. And I think that's a good thing. Hello, Akari. Glenn's fan club asks, why do some writers create a protagonist as a villain-like figure? Pedro Almodovar, Talk to Her, has a protagonist that rapes his patient. The answer is that different artists want to tell different types of stories. The concept that there is always a protagonist, that they are always good, that they're always going on a journey, that is essentially a lie. It is a nonsense piece. It is a thing that people have tried to systematize art, and I promise you, whenever we systematize art, we kill it. We run into a dead end. The idea that all protagonists must be heroic, or that you cannot tell a story examining the life and soul and experiences of a person who does bad things, why not? So that's my answer. Why do some people do it? Because they find it interesting, because they may want to explore things that way, or they may just want to be provocative. They may want to raise questions. So many reasons why someone would do that. The main question that I think you should ask is, why did you think that was unusual? Or not so much unusual, because every piece should be unusual. But why did it seem problematic to you? And I believe the answer will be that you feel like there is a rule, a system, and this was breaking it, which it was. And that may be why. Because if you just tell stories within a formula, you get formulaic stories and formulaic thinking. And so I have not seen that piece, and I do not know Almodovar's work that well, but I guarantee you, partly he was trying to be provocative, and partly he was saying, I want to take your expectations and mess with them. And that is a legitimate artistic path. Hey, Thomas Lewis. Hello, Mythical. Took your advice, short reminder, be brave, do good work, years ago. I'm not a writer now, but an artist, and your words of encouragement helped immensely. Thank you. You are so welcome, and how cool is that you continue to find your creative path without sticking to an art form? That is dynamite. I heartily endorse that. I am so glad that I believe that good creative advice tends to travel. It tends to be able to move between mediums. It tends to be able to move between people, and you can adapt it if it's good. And thank you for saying mine was. It's useful. I can read things about being a musician. I'm completely unable to do anything with music, and I can get something out of it sometimes. Let's see. Okay, so I did this one. Let's keep moving along. Michael says, I don't live in LA. Query letters still work. Well, that's tricky. Query letters, see, this is the thing. I had an agent from 1984 till 2019. So I never had to do that. In other words, my agent would just call up the company that they wanted to submit to. So I don't know if it was even a thing back then. But certainly in the contemporary world, I'm not sure. Also, I don't know that query letters are much of a thing for film work. For novels, I know they are a thing. You still will go to an agent or a publisher. Your first move would be a query letter if they are accepting query letters. Many of them don't. Also, if you are trying to reach an agent in order to have the agent go to the business for you, which in the film business in America, certainly you need to, then yeah, query letters seem like a thing. So sure, that I would guess. But here's a bigger take on the question of I don't live in LA. How do I proceed? My answer would be put LA on the back burner. Keep applying, keep sending things, keep showing things, but focus on what you can do where you are. Are there independent film people? Is there an indie or a small film industry in the place that you are? Are there film students? Are there theaters? What can you do with what you've got access to? Because so many of us, and I include myself, waste way too much time trying to get in this little tiny bottleneck doorway into the Hollywood business. It is now possible to get things going, to make things without that. And I beg you to consider that, to separate out the idea of business success from creative work. Business success is great if you get it, but if you don't get it, do you want to really wait? Do you really want to sit there and go, I'm just going to spend my time trying to figure out what they want and beg them to look at me? Because it's a bad time for all of that. But it's a great time for DIYing, for low budgeting, for film festivaling, for web seriesing, for self-publishing. So therefore, I would urge you to say, yes, of course, if you have a piece of work, submit it to all the agents you can, query everybody on the planet. But in the meantime, do that after you focused on what can I do with what I have, with where I am. This is a hard way of thinking. It's a hard way of living, but honestly, that's what art is. Art is figuring out how you can do the thing you want to do, considering where you are and who you are, because almost no one, even in LA, can get in those doors. I don't think I could now. I stopped trying, but everyone I know who is still trying or is starting out, they are saying the same thing. It's hard times. The world is in chaos. The world is in flux. The various businesses have overcommitted, overexpanded, and are now contracting. Especially the entertainment business, they don't know where the money is. So therefore they are saying, well, we better stop making 400 TV shows a year because no one can watch them. So my answer is there something you can do locally? Is there something you can do, or find a local community, see if there's a way to, maybe even start your own way of communicating with, maybe there's filmmakers in another country who are like, gee, I'd really love a script if it's a good script. And they might say, oh, you know what? If you've written it in such a way that it can be done cheaply and easily, they might say, hey, cool, now we have a script to work with. And you'd get that experience, you get that credit. Who knows what can happen? That's how you do it, in my opinion. Hello, Elroy. Hello. Steed says, Marty McFly said the Sharks still looked fake in 2015. Marty McFly knows many great things. I would agree. Hi, Skepular. Can we learn anything about writing in Jaws from a screenwriting point of view? Damn, sure, of course. Jaws is very, very well constructed in the classic American screenwriting formula. You can learn the shape of a scene. Just look at any scene in Jaws. Take Jaws, watch it on something where you can hit pause. And after every scene, pause. Think about what happened in the scene. Who did what? What was the there's always information in a scene, but there's also always an action. And the things they jump, the things that they decide to not show, are as important as the things they do. To say, oh, we didn't need to see them doing that investigation. We just need to see them reporting that the investigation was done, et cetera, et cetera. So the answer is absolutely. The other thing about Jaws is it continues to move. It constantly, like a shark, it is constantly moving forward, developing storylines. It's balancing the characters in terms of each other. In other words, frankly, none of these characters are really that interesting on their own. They're fine. They're distinctive. We got a New York City cop who's now out being a sheriff of a small island town. We got a oceanologist who's sort of young and hip when the world was changing and things were getting more loose. We've got a gnarly old sea captain who's kind of Captain Ahab-ish. Each one of those is an interesting character, but where the action happens is when they are forced together by events, by circumstances, by the pressure of the situation, so that they must work together, which takes a while for them to learn how, for them to discover the things that they can trust each other with. And of course, famously, the key, and this is really interesting, the place that we really learn about those characters is 2/3 of the way through. We don't spend we get a single beat of each character saying, okay, this is who they are. They get their one scene where we get to get a sense of what they're like, and then we start moving on in the story. But then 2/3 of the way into the thing, the story stops dead in the famous ship's cabin overnight scene where they're sitting and talking and drinking. And all of a sudden we get a sense of A, their relationship developing, and B, the revelations of who they are and why they need to deal with each other in different ways. It all comes in a beautiful scene, which reportedly had about 5 writers on it, and was not part of the original story. The other thing we can learn about writing from Jaws is how different it is from the book. The book is much more of a sprawling tale with a lot of subplots of the town, and the Steven Spielberg and the writers decided to focus it on the men who were going to be on the boat. And that is a good screenwriting lesson. It's not the only way to do it. Jaws could have been super cool as a story of the town with lots of different subplots. But for the movie version, the Hollywood movie version, that script is phenomenal. Okay. The same Steven Soderbergh that made the Ocean series. Yes, when I was talking about Steven Soderbergh, who is reportedly working on a book about Jaws, Steven Soderbergh is a magnificent career to check out. He has done so many different and unique things. And his statements about the work and about the business are well worth looking into. He's made a bunch of graduation speeches and done a bunch of interviews. His TV series, The Nick, is phenomenal. His movie, The Limey, is astonishingly good as far as I'm concerned. The Ocean series is a blast. Some of his early movies are knockout. There's a great film noir with... oh gosh, I can't remember the title of it now, about a guy who works for a armored car, does a robbery. Anyway, the point is, yes, Steven Soderbergh, Che, his 2-part motion picture bio of Che Guevara is phenomenal. He's fascinating. He's smart. He goes small. He goes big. He's well worth studying. Hi, Doreen. Did you receive work after retirement? No. That's partly why I retired. Luckily, I received, because I work in a union, of which there are so few now in America, but my union has provided me with wonderful health care and a beautiful pension. So Just a little shout out to the Writers Guild of America and to unions in general. Amadeus also just got a reissue as well. I am more stunned in cinema than Jaws. I watched both the first time in a cinema. Yes, Amadeus is glorious. It's a fabulous piece. It's based on a very complex and brilliant play, and then the transformation into a movie is a fantastic adaptation of a play into you would not know it was a play when you see the movie. It's wonderful and terrific. Hi, A-Link. Hi, Hasko. Is there any way that we can get out of the formulaic thinking way? That is a great question, Stay Foolish. Let's talk about that. Stay Foolish asks, is there any way that we can get out of the formulaic thinking? Because I had talked about how we get stuck in the formulaic thinking. The answer is explore the art form. In other words, try and look at things that are different. Try and look at movies from different places and times. Honestly, old Hollywood movies from the 30s, 40s, 50s, certainly silent cinema, are very different. They don't follow the formula because nobody had thought of the formula at that time. The formula that we all now say is the screenwriting formula was only invented in the 1980s. A very wonderful book called Screenwriting by Sid Field sort of started it. It started an avalanche of books. Now there's all these different formulae. None of them are the only way. Try to find out about the French New Wave, the English Angry Young Men, the Italian neo-realist, Japanese cinema, Korean cinema, Russian cinema. There's so many different forms of filmmaking. German, Icelandic. There's lots of ways to tell a story. So the first thing I do is say, explore different eras and different types of filmmaking. I just saw Nashville again. Nashville is very hard to see. It's a movie by Robert Altman. It was a very big deal in 1975, the same year as Jaws. It is hard to follow. The formula, it does not follow the formula. It is an ensemble story. Much of it is improvised. Much of it is filmed in a very loose way in which you can't really tell what you're supposed to focus on. And that is the message. The point is, this is not a formulaic story. This is not an easy story of a protagonist. It's a story of a bunch of people in a city that represents America at the time. And it is a very angry, harsh critique of America in 1975. My answer is, therefore, if you look at different types of work, you may not like it. You may not understand it. You may need to watch. I mean, honestly, this was the fourth time I've watched Nashville. It's the first time I've liked it. But I really did like it this time. Anyway, that's one. Read film theory from different times and places. Read Eisenstein, read Truffaut, these are people who wrote essays on the art of filmmaking and proselytize their beliefs. There's plenty of information there about different ideas on filmmaking, but also go outside of film. Study theater, study novels, study all sorts of song lyrics. Try and break up. Musical theater actually is a fascinating way to rethink structure. So I would just say, open up and don't fret too much about people telling you how to win the business game. Instead, explore different ways to look at the art form. And then you choose the ones that work for you. Like, I happen to be a pretty Hollywood-minded person, so I tend to like the Hollywood formula, but I really love when people use it and mess with it, when they use it and undermine it. Where, like, you get some films that are so experimental or so defiant of the formula that they become, to me, very hard to follow sometimes, or hard to care about. So how you can manage to break free of the formula and at the same time tell a story that you believe in, that's the game. That is what every single one of us has to figure out for themselves, because the way that Terrence Malick does it and the way that Steven Spielberg does it, they're very different. And the way that you're going to do it is going to be your plucking of all those different things and finding your puzzle that you are trying to solve with those tools. So that is A good question. I hope that helps. The main thing I would say is open your mind and explore different things that are different, things that are unusual to you. There's plenty, like honestly, the Criterion Collection is a streaming service and a set of DVDs. They put a lot of unformulaic stuff on there. Mubi, another streaming service, does even more experimental stuff. Check it out. You won't love all of it, but some of it may latch onto your soul. And even more interesting, some of it you may say, ooh, I would like to take this way they do it, but apply it to an entirely different way of working because I want to do a musical and I'm going to do that this way. That's all there for you. There is no right way. There is no one way. The idea that there is a right answer to making art is a formula. So as soon as you start to question, is this right for me? Is this something I like? If all you like is formulaic stuff, do the formula. That's fine if all you like. But if that's all you've seen, then you should explore. That's my main message. There's nothing wrong with being formulaic if you love the formula. But you should see how people use the formula in different ways. The movie Unforgiven takes the Western formula, but it does some very interesting things with it. Then you get something like Altman's McCabe and Mrs. Miller, which takes the Western formula and just trashes it. Not that I'm the biggest Altman fan, but it just happens to be on Criterion right now. The formula against formula. No, there is no formula. That's the against. That's the only way. A-Link says, I like that. Good creative advice can be more between art forms. Yeah, absolutely. You can take stuff from opera. You can take, take from popular music, whatever you want. Music videos, chess, video games, anime, animation, comic books, who knows? It's all there. See, how could I do that in this form? Okay. Do you think short story competitions are helpful for building a writing career? I want to write novels, plays, and a screenplay. Well, here's the thing. Any form of competition is good if you win. So therefore, yes, if you were to have any form of recognition by any form of authority or institution, so you can say, yes, I got into a film festival, or yes, I was quarterfinalist for this competition. If you can claim that, that means that somebody looked at a big pile of work and said, oh, this is pretty good. It's not going to win, but it's up in the top 10. It's up in the top quarter, whatever that is. That means that if someone is looking at your work and you can say, would you please read my thing? I was a quarterfinalist in this competition. I had a story in this competition, all that stuff. Great. So the answer is short story competitions in particular. I don't know anything about them, but I do know that in general, competitions have an upside and a downside. The downside is A, they usually cost money, and B, it can be very disheartening because you don't know what is going on behind the scenes in how things are chosen. And so therefore you can get hurt or discouraged by rejection. So all I would say is never apply to any form of competition if you are not okay with losing because you don't know. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know how they decide. You don't know what else is up there. So therefore, I would say that's the first thing about competitions. The other is they cost money and you have to be able to afford to throw it away, to say, I am going to put money into this competition application and probably I'm throwing that away. But that's okay. It's the thing you have to take. Don't spend too much on that stuff. But then the question of building a writing career, if you want to write novels, plays, and screenplays, that's actually 3 separate careers. And they each require that you put in probably 10 years of work to accomplish things in any one of those forms. So the answer would be prioritize. Say, I'm going to focus mainly on this one. If you really want a career, if you simply want, as I suggest and advise, to explore and practice whatever is most available to your resources, do that. Write whatever you can write it however you can write it, and get it out however you can get it out. But if you do want a career in the sense that you want either recognition from the industry or ideally to make money from it, then you usually need to focus. It is what usually would happen is somebody gets celebrated for one path and then they have the option, the door opens to try the other paths. So if you are a famous playwright or a successful playwright, you're more likely to be able to get a publisher to look at your novel or a producer to look at your screenplay. The answer is, are competitions helpful? They are helpful in the sense that they show that you are at least quality enough to be recognized by people facing a flood of material. But beyond that, no, they will not make that difference. They won't make that much of a difference. So only do it to the extent that you comfortably can. So are you saying the protagonist is possible to be an egotistic maniac? Absolutely. Many protagonists are egotistic maniac. I would suggest that the protagonist of There Will Be Blood is an egotistic maniac. Likewise, actually, the same actor, same director, Phantom Thread. I would say that there is a fair argument that Tony Stark in the Marvel movies is an egotistical maniac. And he somewhat learns to temper that, but there you go. So the answer is yes, a protagonist can be anything. You just have to think about the ramifications of what happens when you tell a story about an egotistical maniac. For one thing, you might be telling a tragedy about how being an egotistical maniac is going to cause your collapse at the end. Or you might be saying something like, well, an egotistical maniac will win the game but lose their soul. All things are possible. Skepular asks, what about the rewrite carousel diluting the original vision? Yes. The answer to that is, yeah, that sure happens. Here's the thing about rewriting. There's the rewriting you do to make it the best version that you think it will be. But then when you are collaborating with others or working with the business, you will be asked to do rewrites. Very often, those can improve it. However, also often, you'll get people with different agendas, different taste, different needs, and they will say, I'm going to take this thing and I'm going to bend it towards my goal, which is not necessarily the goal that you had. And then, yes, it can be bad. It can also be good. I mean, there's certain things where something started out as one thing and turned into another because of various agendas, and that was a good thing. The original plan, the original script of American Beauty had a very different vision, a very different ending. And the director reshaped it, frankly, as far as I understand, in post-production, in editing. Likewise, Chinatown, famously, not what the original writer intended. The story, especially the ending, was changed drastically. The writer was always a little pissed about it. On the other hand, I happen to think it's better that way. But yet, we also know of thousands of stories of things being destroyed because conflicting agendas were pushing the script into different directions so that it became a muddle. This happens a great deal. The only satisfaction you can get from that is if you want to be a career professional writer, you have to learn how to deal with that. You have to figure out who's got the power and to do what they want and to help them get what they want done. And if that power then shifts, you got to go with that. And you've got to learn how to apply your talent to something which is being carouseled and changed all the time. That is the job of a professional screenwriter. It is not to have a vision and stick to it. It is to have a talent and apply that to different situations. So the answer is, does the rewrite carousel often dilute the original vision? Yes. Most of the time, 90% of the time. But at the same time, a good 50% of the time, there's other things. A carousel isn't a good thing, but a rewrite, a change, an influence of a collaborator, it's great, makes it better. So, Doreen says, would you say your novel is commercial, literary, or upmarket? Do you consider the significant differences in these to be significant to a writer? That's an interesting question, partly because I don't know what upmarket is. I've never heard that term. Not in terms of as a literary path, genre. There is certainly commercial and literary fiction. And I would say that my goal, honestly, is more literary. My taste is readable, is the things that make commercials. So my goal is to make a popular literary work. On the other hand, I don't want it to be particularly difficult or fancy, but I do have literary ambitions in the idea that I am trying to do things that are not just about storytelling, but are about ideas, themes, feelings, which may not be commercially exciting. But if I do it well, it should be such a good read and it has a good story. So therefore, there's commercial elements to it. But overall, I would choose to have it be an accessible literary work. That would be my thing. Not a fancy commercial thing. It's just not that commercial. And if you tell me what upmarket is, I'll tell you where I stand on it. Do I consider those differences significant to a writer? To a certain extent, not crazy different. Like, let's put it this way. If you are aiming for a certain market, then yes, it makes a big difference as you write things to say, I understand this marketplace at this moment, because they change all the time, especially now they change fast. But still, if you are saying, I want to have a commercial bestseller in this genre, detective story, romance novel, fantasy romance novel, whatever it is, you should indeed know what that marketplace, what that business, what that culture is valuing and how much that dovetails with your own values. So I do think that that's significant. I think you'd be somewhat foolish to just blithely say, I don't care about this stuff. I'm not even going to think about it. But within that, to say, is it reasonable? Like, is there such a thing, in my case, as a popular, accessible, historical literary novel? And the answer is yes. There's some terrific ones. One of them is called All the Light We Cannot See. I read that and I went, wow, incredible read, quite a literary work as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. So the answer is, I do think it's important. I think if you have in mind a very self-referential, meta, literary, complex puzzle novel, you have to recognize that most people are not going to read it because they read for story. Most popular books are story-based. So you should know that about what you do. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm saying you should know that you're unlikely to have the people who publish, thriller novels say, oh, we really want this arcane puzzle novel with no story, But then again, you get something, there are moments when The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco, and then later Foucault's Pendulum, huge literary bestsellers. I'm not sure if those happen that much anymore, but you never know. Now and then, you get a literary novelist who breaks through as a popular work. We'll see. What do you think about biopics? Tarantino says he hates them. Well, I don't hate them, but I don't. I like them in that I like getting the sort of condensed, stylized, easy version of a biography that I'm not going to read. I'm not going to study the lives of many people but I'll watch a 2-hour biopic. The problem is so many of them are so hungry to fulfill a formula that they don't give enough truth. They don't explore enough reality. And I will say one thing about biopics, it really bothers me when they make stuff up or change things purely to make them more popular. It's natural. You have to change things. You have to condense and reorganize, and you give your own take to it. But the problem is most biopics are so hungry to be a hit that they simply imitate other biopics. And that's sad to me. On the other hand, I think Gandhi is a terrific biopic. It's a good school lesson in the basics of Gandhi. I think it's well done. It's not particularly inventive or original, but it's well told and it makes its ideas clear. And it gives you some sense of the value of this person's experience and of the message they were trying to convey. Cool. I'm quite looking forward to the 4 Beatles biopics. I think that's going to be an interesting experiment. I think that probably like the recent Dylan mostly they're doing musicians right now. The Dylan Complete Unknown. It's a good basic intro if you don't know anything about Dylan. Well done, respectful, interesting. I'm very much looking forward to Deliver Me From Nowhere, the Springsteen biopic about a very small slice of his experience. So we'll see. The answer is I don't hate them, but I don't overwhelmingly respect them. The TV show Sanctuary started as a web show, became a relatively successful Canadian sci-fi show. The actors and writers did the web show because no studio would look at them. Not great, but they still did it. Yes, absolutely. Likewise, it's Always Sunny in Always Sunny in Philadelphia. They said, hey, we want to make a sitcom. No one will listen to us. We're going to shoot a pilot. They did their pilot. It knocked out a person who happened to be into taking a risk and doing something different. It's now the longest running sitcom, possibly show in history. So yes, absolutely. It is absolutely possible. Also, there's a show on HBO, I've never seen it, called High Maintenance that began as a web series. More and more, you'll find that what happens is someone will start with something like a play. They'll say, okay, I can't do a movie, but I could write a play and I could probably get 4 people to do it. There's theater companies and people. And so you do that because then you can get it done. And then maybe that will get the attention of someone. It's always more likely to get the attention of the business by producing something yourself. Yes, a script is a fine thing, but some form that actually can go to an audience, even a small audience, is better than just a script. Okay, there are more and more 1-minute short fictional videos here in YouTube now. This is true. There are all sorts of forms opening up. I frankly would have a hard time making a 1-minute or 5-minute story. I think it's a cool thing. It's a cool form, and why not? But for me, I think that probably the short form for me would be more interesting serialized. In other words, to say, I'm going to tell a 2-hour story. I'm going to do it in 10 to 15-minute increments. Cool. I think that's an interesting possible form. Wolf Power says, hello, no question, but want to tell you I just saw a fantastic movie that was shot on iPhone and uploaded to YouTube. Excuse me. It's called Vampire Next Door at Film Idiot, partly in French. How cool. I'm very glad to hear that. Thank you for referring it. That's great. Germany Football Rocks. I don't understand. We're talking about Jaws. I don't understand why the mayor just gave in at the midpoint. He gave in because the shark ate more people. The shark ate people on the 4th of July, which is the biggest holiday of the summer. And therefore, there was no more option to stonewall and say, oh, no, the shark won't eat anybody. Spoilers, by the way, but I figure most people know something about Jaws. And the story of Jaws is the shark eats people. So the answer is, the mayor in Jaws refuses to recognize the threat that the more expert people are telling him about because he is concerned about loss of business. And once the shark attacks on the 4th of July, and everyone sees it and it becomes a public scandal, no one's going to come do business. No one's going to the beach anyway. So therefore, the mayor says, do what you got to do. We got to get rid of the shark. Do you have experience with musicals? Hello, some virile gay thing. Great name. Yes, I do, actually. I tried to be a filmmaker when I was a teenager, but at the time, it was technologically, this was mid-1970s, it was technologically impossible to make sync sound film without a lot of money. So all I had was silent film. I couldn't make films. I tried making silent films for a while with Super 8, which was a home film method. But eventually I got frustrated and I said, you know what, I'm going to do theater. And I was in high school, so the thing that schools do is they do musicals. Every spring there's a school musical. And so I saw this stage musical and I thought it would be really cool to do what's now called a jukebox musical. In 1975, it was not called anything. People didn't do it. But the idea of taking established popular songs and turning and building a musical around them. So I was a big fan of a guy named Noel Coward. He was a playwright, actor, and musician, songwriter and singer back in the mid 20th century. And I loved his songs. And I thought it would be really fun to write a jukebox musical based on Noel Coward's songs. So I wrote that. That got me in with the theater department of my high school, and I was introduced to a guy who wrote music, and I wrote an original musical with him. When I went to college, once again, there was no filmmaking program in college at the time. The technology wasn't available. So therefore, I stayed in the theater there in college, did a couple of musicals. After that, I came back to New York City where I lived after college, and I had to choose my focus. For a while, I tried to stay in the theater, but eventually I said, I have to focus on screenwriting. I have to focus on one thing. It's something I said before. When you have multiple career paths, usually, and this is not a rule, but usually it helps to focus on one. And not to say you can't explore the others, but it's just very difficult to make progress in a career when you are making progress in several careers at the same time. It's just only so much time available to you. So I put theater aside for screenwriting. Anyway, that was, yes, my big period of musicals was, I was very influenced by Cole Porter, Rodgers and Hammerstein, all those classic early mid-century American musicals, but I was at the start. Like, I came into musicals just as Sondheim was hitting his stride. So it was right after Follies. I saw on stage, I saw Sweeney Todd, I saw Pacific Overtures, but I was mesmerized by Company and particularly by Follies. I think Follies is one of the most extraordinary theatrical works you can have. So that was where Sondheim was the only one doing what Sondheim was doing. Now everyone does what Sondheim did. But at the time, I believe the last Sondheim musical I saw on Broadway was Sunday in the Park with George. I remember the three major networks had a movie of the week. Low budget, but it gave actors a big break. Not only did it give actors a big break, yes, there was a movie of the week. It was called a TV movie. It was a movie made low budget for television. And of course, it gave Spielberg his big break. Spielberg's first big break. He had done some episodic TV, but he did a TV movie called Duel, which I saw on the movie of the week with Dennis Weaver as a guy who has a duel with a invisible, menacing truck driver. It's quite cool. Hello, Lake Filter. Okay, I'm going to say we gotta close down the questions and comments for the moment, but I'm going to be doing this every week. I'm going to be doing more just open, what the hell, we'll talk about stuff. So don't panic. It's kind of like Tarantino movies referenced a lot of classic films instead of following any rules. Yes, Tarantino very much, Tarantino not just referenced classic movies, but he also referenced Japanese cinema, anime, exploitation films. He had a wider variety of references because he worked in a video store and he had grown up watching exploitation films. And many of those didn't follow the rules because they simply either didn't care or didn't have the money. They had other interests. So yes. I have been reading Akira Kurosawa's diary, and it's extraordinary, the knowledge that is inside. Really, I did not know that existed, and cool. That is great to know. Thank you. Okay. Alex Alexis says, hi. Out of curiosity, any director that was alive while you were in the industry that you wish you could have worked with? Oh yeah, all of them. If so, what fascinated you about their work? Oh gosh, of course. No. When I was in the business, there were tons. Like I hardly worked with anyone. I worked with Greg Hoblet. I worked with Callie Corey. I worked with a handful of others that never got made. And so honestly, almost everyone, but just offhand, like I actually knew Robert Benton. I met him in New York before I got into the business, and I love Robert Benton's work. Wish I could have worked with him. Uh, yeah, Coppola, sure, absolutely. I probably would have driven me nuts, but I would have tried. Um, um, yeah, so many. Wayne Wang um, uh, did a lot of interesting work. He did stuff with Paul Auster, a movie called Smoke that I really liked. Um, oh gosh, I'm Lumet. Oh my God, Lumet, Pollock. I mean, if I could have worked with them, it would have been the best thing in the world. Lumet and Pollock are among my favorite Sydneys. Truly great filmmakers. Soderbergh was around when I was around. Yeah, okay. Stay Foolish says, I read Andre Bazin recently, but I don't really understand much. That's okay. Don't even worry. Well, first of all, there's nothing wrong with watching a YouTube class about things or reading somebody else's explanation of what they think. You're just trying to grab the ideas. And if a lot of film theory is very obscure and academic or involved in little internecine, troubles that are long past. So the answer is, yeah, check it out. If something isn't accessible to you, like I'm never going to understand most philosophy texts, so I just like if I read a review of them and they summarize it for me. Don't do ChatGPT summary. Read a real essayist on it. That would be my suggestion. But admittedly, a lot of film. Here's what I would say: don't worry if you don't understand Bazin, but do try and watch the other French New Wave. Watch Truffaut. Watch Renoir. Watch all the fabulous filmmakers of that era and that world, and see what they brought and what you like and don't like. If you don't get the theory, don't worry about it. Not a problem. I love reading screenplays. Does it really need a movie attached to it? Wow. No, if you love reading screenplays, and so do I sometimes, great. But the majority of the reading public is not going to read a screenplay. They don't understand how to read a screenplay, to imagine it. So therefore, the answer is it does not need a movie attached to it for you. For most readers, it does. And certainly most people in the industry are not reading a screenplay for the read. They're reading it for whether or not it will work for their business or their agenda, whatever it is. Why has nobody ever done a parody of musicals? Actually, there was one. David Zucker does a lot of parodies, but never musicals. Is it impossible to spoof La La Land? Well, it's certainly possible to do. You need to get someone who will pay for it. But there was a movie in the late 1970s, I believe, called Movie Movie. And the title was Movie. And it was two short, like 1 hour mini movies parodying old classic movie formula. The first one was a boxing movie, a black and white Warner Brothers style boxing story, and it's hilarious. And then the second one was a color Busby Berkeley movie musical. And it was also, and they used the same cast, many of the same cast members in the two movies. It's a very, very interesting movie called Movie. Sometimes I feel like I'm being pretentious for overusing show, don't tell, resulting in wild, unconventional formats to tell a story. Do I have reasonable grounds, or am I being pretentious? Well, you're being pretentious if you are doing it in order to make an effect or an impact by doing that. In other words, if you are being unconventional in order to appear unconventional, then you are being pretentious. Or if you believe that people will be impressed by your wildly unconventional things. But if you are doing it because you believe it truly tells the story in a way that you need to tell it, then you're not being pretentious. You may be artsy, you may be difficult, but you're not being pretentious. The answer is pretentious is the attempt to influence people with your posturing without actually caring about the thing you're doing. That's what pretentious is. As in pretending. You're pretending to care about something because you feel that it is impressive or will impress. Short story competition will usually just cost $10, while screenplay costs more than $100. This is not fair. They scam screenwriters, obviously. Yes, That is absolutely true. Well, that's because short story writers never have any belief that they will ever make any money. So how can they possibly spend $100? Whereas a screenwriter thinks, if I sell my script, it'll make $1 million. So therefore, they're willing to throw away 100. That is the answer to why that happens. And possibly short story competitions are just more reasonable and kind. Lake Filter says, as an example, I got a chapter written like a fairy tale to introduce a naive person, another written in research logs to introduce a scientist, and a holy scripture to introduce a fallen deity. Well, that sounds cool. There's a famous book called Visit from the Goon Squad by Jennifer Egan. Same thing. Different chapters are in different forms, and you sort of mentally put them together to follow the story. Likewise, the book Ulysses by James Joyce. So the answer is that an unacceptable form? No. Is it a difficult form? Yes. Will the average story-centered reader follow it? Not necessarily. Is it wrong? No. You just have to recognize that you're going to lose a certain audience who want things made simple or easy. But you don't want to do that, so don't worry about it. I thought Daniel Day-Lewis in Phantom Thread was just suffering from grief, not really that egotistic. I felt like he was escaping from reality. Fair. I was being mean to Daniel Day-Lewis's character in Phantom Thread. On the other hand, he was somewhat self-centered, let's say. And while you can be self-centered because you are suffering from grief, because you are, quote, high-strung or have anxiety or trauma, all those things can actually make you somewhat selfish. And we all do our best to recognize it in others, I hope, but we also have to recognize that if we are suffering from grief, that does not exclude us from the requirement to recognize that other people have their needs too. Hopefully, we can manage that. Sanchez Pablo says, does your advice work in horror genre? I think so. It feels like the horror genre, the protagonist is escaping from some force instead of having goals or obstacles. I disagree. I believe that many horror stories do use that structure, but I don't believe that's a trend within the genre. However, I believe that most good horror stories have someone with an active desire, which is coming into conflict or which is made dangerous by the actions that they take. In other words, they go into the woods, which is scary, because of something they want. They want to grow up. Or someone decides to create a monster out of human parts because they want to defeat death. That is not someone who, like, once things go wrong, they are trying to escape from what they did. But it is a relatively narrow subgenre to say, oh, these people are driving on the road, their car breaks down, they go to a local town, and they find, then they have to escape from the monstrous killers. Sometimes that is the thing that they are trying to convey is the randomness of evil. That sometimes evil and fearful things can come upon us unfairly. And that's a cool story to tell, but it's not the only story to tell. So the answer is, and I personally believe that those stories work best when these people have a goal, which may get intersected or interrupted by an outside force. But one of the worst things about a lot of horror movies is the people are kind of generic until the bad thing shows up. To me, that's crappy. And one of the reasons that so much horror is bad, because it feels like we're just sort of spinning our wheels, doing cliches until the interesting horror shows up. Why? Do you think 1930s screwball comedy is learnable for screenwriting? Absolutely. I personally learned it. I love screwball comedy. I am looking forward to its return, which there will be a cycle in which it comes back. But yes, no, you can look at screwball comedies from the era when they were hot in the 1930s, 1940s, and say, what elements do they have? How can I take that and make a new version of it? Absolutely. I have done that myself. Hopefully we'll put that script up on my website and do a behind the script. I did a couple. I did a couple, but one was called Cinderella Says No. Do you ever think of the marketing aspect when you have an idea for a novel or screenplay? Yes, absolutely. I do think I don't think that you should steer exclusively by the marketing, but I do think that it's useful to understand that what you are doing is marketable. In other words, to say, oh yeah, there are racing movies, and this can be sold as a racing movie, or this is an ensemble drama, historical drama, and to say yes, that aspect, or oh, this character is going to undergo something that's an interesting and controversial experience, and that will be something that we can talk about in the marketing. Oh, what's it like when you suddenly go blind? Whatever it is, you are finding the marketing opportunities. I don't believe that you should steer exclusively to those, but there's no reason not to know them. I think that most of us think, when we think of something creative, we often think, where does it fit in to the creative consumption that I do? In other words, I like this kind of thing. We very rarely come up with a story that we hate. It's like, oh, I hate war movies, but I'm going to decide to spend a year writing one. Usually we like war movies and want to do our version of it or change them in some way. Okay, no more questions. The craziest idea of a producer was to make 2 versions of the prequel of The Exorcist and release both at the same time. That is true, but not entirely true. I don't believe they didn't intend to do that. What happened was, with the prequel to The Exorcist, they started down one path. I believe it was with Paul Schrader, who I believe had Final Cut, and he made the movie and they didn't like it, so they made it again. They get someone else to do it. And that second one they released because it's like, why not? I believe. I don't know all the details, but I do know that was not something where they said, let's do 2 versions. They did one, they didn't like it, and they started again. Doreen explains upmarket. Upmarket used to be known as book club novels. It's a blend of commercial and literary. Interesting. Yes, I would hope to be upmarket. It's interesting because I believe more and more book club novels have become less literary. That truthfully, the really exclusive literary goals tend to be difficult, and therefore book clubs often don't read them. As book clubs have become more of a industry unto themselves and a social experience unto themselves, most book clubs seem to want fairly enjoyable commercial accessible work. Not always, but it is interesting to know that there was a period, I think it's kind of over, but there was a period 10, 20 years ago when book clubs started by Oprah's book club would celebrate a literary work. East of Eden was a big Oprah deal. So yes, I understand where upmarket came from. I don't know how much upmarket still matters, but what do I know? I didn't even know it was a thing. I believe your novel would be upmarket. Upmarket fiction combines the best aspects of literary fiction and commercial fiction. It's sellable, but appealing to the intellectual. Yes, it's certainly a good goal. Thank you, Wolf. It's where I'm trying to go with my novel. I'm writing for a niche. I would aspire to upmarketness. Definitely. I didn't know about it, but yes, absolutely. I am Mr. Upmarket. What do you think about the teacher saying the protagonists should face a dilemma instead of problems? I would say what I always say, which is certainly that is a way to look at it, but that there are no strict rules. Allow me to refer to my screenwriting rules video in which I analyze this whole concept, that there is a rule in which all scripts should do this or that. My answer is simply, that's always wrong. There is no rule on earth that everyone should do. However, that doesn't mean that if you're working on your script and you're trying to have your protagonist face problems and it's not working for you, and you hear about this idea that maybe it's a dilemma in the sense that it's a choice, a difficult question instead of a problem. And if that helps you to tell your story, then it's great. The answer is to have any teacher say all stories should do X or Y or Z is, in my opinion, a mistake. Let's be nice. Anyone who insists that all artwork follows a single form is, not even my opinion. This is just factually wrong. They don't. However, it is great to have a toolbox to say, I am going to know the theory of dilemmas over problems so that when I'm working, if I'm having a problem with my problems, I check out the dilemma. That's a good thing. So what do I think about those teachers? I just hope they say it in, this is an interesting tool, as opposed to, this is what you should do. Are you excited for Ted Lasso finally renewed for season 4 after an entire year of hiatus? Yeah, kinda. I really felt like it was done. I'm curious, but I fear that they will be just dragging it out or trying to recycle. If they find something new and original to do with it, great. But otherwise, no, I'm actually not. I'm actually kind of sorry. I wish that they would have said, let's make a new show, a new Ted Lasso. And so I'm a little sad that they did that because it was good and they found an ending and that was enough. Yeah, I hit the life. Okay. Okay. Hello, Daniel Reyes. I am very sorry. I do not understand Spanish. I apologize, and I'm not sure. Daniel seems to be saying some angry things, and I apologize. I really do. Okay, heading out. Hasko, screenplay with movie attached. You have to read us. Does there have to be a movie to make a screenplay workable? Your Homeless screenplay and movie did play in my mind. Thank you. It's a movie, the script I wrote called Jane, which I have done what I call a behind the script video about. Please search it, Behind the Script Jane, on my channel. I did a live stream about it. Yes, I aspire to make a script that reads. I believe that good screenwriting style should make the story come alive in the reader's mind. In other words, you're not reading instructions. You are reading a description of a thing and making it happen in their mind. I do believe that that is the job. The tricky thing is to do that job within the very, very narrow restrictions of dialogue, of very short physical descriptions, etc., etc. That's the game. That's what I hope to demonstrate by giving you these behind-the-scenes scripts. So the answer is thank you, Hasko. Thank you. You are welcome, Lake Filter, and you, Scapular. He was just saying thank you. Cool. That's great. Thank you. Daniel, I'm so glad that you said thank you. I have a problem. I think there was a translation app involved or something, but you are more than welcome, Daniel. Thank you. And thank all of you. I will see you next week and we'll do some more of this stuff. And isn't that great? In the meantime, stay cool, stay hydrated, and go write something.